"My dear fellow," Holmes began, his voice low and rhythmic, "life is infinitely stranger than anything we could ever invent. If we could fly out that window, hover over this great city, and peel off the roofs like lids from a jar, the things we would see. The strange coincidences, the plans crossing one another, the events unfolding over generations, would make the most exciting fiction seem dull and predictable." Watson shook his head, skeptical. "I don't buy it, Holmes. Look at the newspapers. The crimes are usually just crude, ugly, and boring." "Ah," Holmes replied, "the newspapers miss the point. They focus on what the judge says, not on the tiny details that hold the real truth. Depend on it, there is nothing so unnatural as a commonplace crime." Watson pulled a morning paper from the floor to prove his point. "Look at this headline, 'A husband's cruelty to his wife.' I don't even need to read it. It'll be the same old story. The husband drinks, he gets angry, he hits her. It's as basic as it gets." Holmes chuckled, taking the paper. "Actually, Watson, you chose a poor example. I worked on this case. This husband didn't drink, and he wasn't a typical brute. No, his specific habit was ending every meal by taking out his false teeth and hurling them at his wife. You must admit, that's a detail no novelist would ever dream up." Holmes offered Watson a pinch of snuff from a magnificent gold box. A gift, he noted casually, from the King of Bohemia. Holmes stood by the window watching the street below. "A client is arriving," he murmured. Watson looked over his shoulder and saw a large woman in a feathered hat fidgeting on the pavement. She stepped forward, then back, her fingers nervous. "I've seen those symptoms before," Holmes whispered. "When a woman hesitates like that, it's an affair of the heart. She wants help, but she's embarrassed. If she were truly angry, she'd have broken our doorbell by now. Here she comes." The door opened, and Miss Mary Sutherland entered the room. Holmes greeted her warmly and, after a single sharp glance, asked, "Don't you find that with your short-sightedness, all that typing is a bit of a strain?" Mary gasped, her face turning pale. "You've heard of me. How else could you know I'm a typist?" "It's my business to know," Holmes said with a smile. "Tell me, why did you rush here so quickly?" Mary vented her frustration. Her fiancé, Hosmer Angel, had vanished without a trace. Her stepfather, a man named Mr. Windbank, refused to help. In fact, he seemed strangely unconcerned about the whole thing. He just kept saying there was no harm done, Mary cried. "And it made me so mad I just put on my hat and came straight to you." As she spoke, Holmes leaned back, his eyes fixed on the ceiling, already beginning to piece together the strange, hidden machinery of the young woman's life. "Tell me about your income," Holmes asked, his voice sharp with sudden interest. "Does it come from the family business?" "Oh, no," Mary replied. "My Uncle Ned in New Zealand left me £2,500. I can't touch the main sum, but it pays me £100 a year in interest." "100 a year?" Holmes leaned in. "A single lady can live quite comfortably on 60. You must travel and enjoy yourself." "I could," she said simply, "but I don't want to be a burden at home. So, I let my mother and stepfather use the money while I live with them. Mr. Windbank collects the interest every quarter and gives it to Mother. I pay my own way with the money I earn from my typewriting." "Now," said Holmes, "tell us about Mr. Hosmer Angel." Mary flushed. "I met him at a ball for gasfitters. My stepfather, Mr. Windbank, didn't want me to go. He never wants me to go anywhere. He even gets angry if I want to go to a Sunday school picnic. He told me I had nothing to wear, but I had my purple plush dress ready. Finally, he had to leave for France on business, so Mother and I went to the ball anyway. That's where I met Hosmer." I imagine Mr. Windbank was furious when he returned, Holmes remarked. Actually, he was very nice about it, she said. He just laughed and said women always get their way. Mary explained that she and Hosmer began to see each other, but only when her stepfather was away. Hosmer was so shy, she whispered. He preferred walking in the evening because he hated being noticed. He had a very soft, whispering voice, a result of a bad throat infection as a child, and he always wore tinted glasses because his eyes were weak, just like mine. And where did he work? Holmes asked. He was a cashier in an office on Leadenhall Street, Mary replied. But I don't know which office. He lived on the premises. He wouldn't even let me mail letters to his office because he said the other clerks would tease him. I had to send them to the post office to be held for him. He even asked me not to type my letters to him. He said a typewriter felt cold and machine-like between us. The story took a frantic turn. While Mr. Windbank was away in France again, Hosmer pressured Mary to marry him immediately. He made her swear on a Bible that she would always be true to him, no matter what happened. The wedding was set for last Friday, Mary said, her voice trembling. We were to be married at the church near King's Cross. Hosmer arrived at our house in a cab. He put Mother and me into one cab, and he got into a second one behind us. We arrived at the church first, she continued, and we waited. The second cab pulled up, the driver opened the door, and it was empty. The driver was baffled. He had seen Hosmer get in with his own eyes, but the man had simply vanished into thin air between my house and the church. I haven't heard a word from him since. Holmes sat back, a thin trail of cigarette smoke rising around him. The puzzle was beginning to take a very definite shape. It sounds as though you've been treated terribly, Holmes said sympathetically. Oh, no, sir, Mary insisted. Hosmer was too kind for that. All morning he kept telling me that no matter what happened, even if we were suddenly separated, I must stay true to him. He said he would come back for me sooner or later. It felt like a strange thing to say on a wedding day, but now it seems he knew something bad was coming. Indeed, Holmes mused. And how did your family react? My mother was angry and told me never to speak of it again, Mary said, wiping her eyes. But my stepfather seemed to agree with me. He said there was no reason for Hosmer to leave me at the church door on purpose. After all, Hosmer didn't want my money. It's a complete mystery, and I can't sleep for worrying about it. Holmes rose from his chair. Leave the matter to me. I'll look into it, but my advice is to try and forget Mr. Hosmer Angel. I fear you won't see him again. Mary shook her head stubbornly. I shall stay true to him. He'll find me waiting when he returns. Despite her silly hat and simple face, there was a nobility in her faith that earned even Holmes's respect. She left him her address and a few of Hosmer's letters before heading out into the London fog. Once she was gone, Holmes lit his old clay pipe. He vanished behind a cloud of blue smoke, his face looking bored and thoughtful. A very interesting girl, he remarked. The problem itself is quite common. I've seen similar cases in my files, but the details here are unique. Watson was confused. You seem to read so much into her. I saw a well-to-do woman in a brown dress, but I didn't see anything mysterious. You saw Watson, but you didn't observe, Holmes countered. You missed the important things because you didn't know where to look. I always look at the sleeves first. Did you notice the double line on her wrists? That's where a typist presses against a desk. The marks were perfect. I also saw the marks of glasses on her nose, Holmes continued, which told me she had weak eyes and did a lot of typing. But the most interesting part was her boots. Her boots? Watson asked. They were odd, Holmes said with a small smile. One had a decorated toe, the other was plain. One was only half-buttoned, and the other was buttoned in the wrong holes. When a woman who is otherwise neatly dressed leaves the house in odd, unbuttoned shoes, it's a clear sign she left in a great hurry. Watson leaned forward, captivated as always. "And what else did you see?" "I also noticed," Holmes said, "that she had written a letter just before leaving home. Her right glove was torn, and both the glove and her finger were stained with violet ink. She was in such a hurry she dipped her pen too deep." Holmes then asked me to read the newspaper description of the missing Hosmer Angel. Appearance: 5 feet 7 inches, sturdy, pale skin, black hair, balding, bushy black whiskers, and a mustache. Distinctive features: tinted glasses and a soft, whispering voice. Clothing: a black coat, tweed trousers, and brown gaiters over his boots. Holmes looked over Hosmer's love letters. "Nothing special here," he remarked, "except for one very strange thing. The signature is typewritten. Maybe he wanted to be able to deny he wrote them later?" I suggested. "No, it's more important than that," Holmes said with a confident air. "I'm writing 2 letters now, one to a business in the city and one to the stepfather, Mr. Windbank. That should settle everything. Until then, we wait." The next evening, I returned to Baker Street. Holmes looked relaxed, though the smell of chemicals in the air showed he'd been busy with experiments all day. "Have you solved the mystery?" I asked. "There never really was a mystery," Holmes replied. "The only problem is that the law can't actually punish the man for what he's done." Just then, Mr. James Windbank, the stepfather, walked in. He was about 30, with a smooth, fake-friendly manner and very sharp eyes. He acted annoyed that Mary had bothered Holmes, calling it a family misfortune that should have stayed private. "I'm sorry she wasted your time," Windbank said. "You'll never find this Hosmer Angel." "Actually," Holmes said quietly, "I've already found him." Windbank jumped, dropping his gloves in shock. Holmes continued calmly, "You see, every typewriter is unique, just like handwriting. They get worn down in specific ways. In the letter you sent me, Mr. Windbank, the letter E is blurry and the R is missing its tail. There are 14 other tiny flaws as well." Windbank stayed cool. "We use that machine at my office. It's probably just old." "And here is the interesting part," Holmes said, picking up the love letters from Hosmer Angel. "In these letters, the E is also blurry and the R has no tail. In fact, using my magnifying glass, I can see all 14 flaws from your office machine are right here in Mr. Angel's letters." Holmes looked Windbank straight in the eye. The trap was set. Mr. Windbank jumped up, clutching his hat. "I don't have time for this fantasy, Mr. Holmes. If you can catch the man, do it. Otherwise, I'm leaving." Holmes stood up and calmly locked the door. "I've already caught him." "Where?" "Who?" Windbank shouted, his face turning pale as he looked around like a trapped animal. "It's no use," Holmes said smoothly. "Sit down and let's talk. The whole thing is transparent." Windbank collapsed back into his chair, sweat breaking out on his forehead. It's not a crime," he stammered. "You can't sue me for it." "I'm afraid you're right," Holmes replied. "The law can't touch you. But it was the cruelest, most heartless trick I've ever seen." Holmes leaned back and explained the whole scheme as if he were telling a story. The motive: Windbank married a woman much older than himself for her money. He also wanted to keep control of Mary's £100 a year. If Mary married, that money would go with her. The disguise: to prevent her from finding a real husband, Windbank decided to become her suitor himself. With his wife's help, he put on tinted glasses, fake whiskers, and spoke in a whisper to hide his voice. Since Mary had poor eyesight, the disguise worked perfectly. The vanishing act: He couldn't keep the lie going forever. He needed to get rid of Hosmer Angel, in a way that would leave Mary so heartbroken and confused that she wouldn't look at another man for years. The church door. He took her to the church, stepped into one side of a four-wheeler cab, and slipped out the other side while no one was looking. He simply vanished, leaving Mary waiting at the altar. It was just a joke at first. Windbank groaned. We didn't think she'd take it so seriously. Windbank recovered his confidence, realizing he wouldn't go to jail. Maybe you're right, Holmes, he sneered. But by locking that door, you are the one breaking the law now. Holmes unlocked the door and threw it open. The law can't touch you, but you deserve a good whipping. If Mary had a brother, he'd lay a whip across your shoulders. Holmes's face flushed with anger. He reached for a hunting whip on the wall, but before he could grab it, Windbank dashed out of the room. We heard him flying down the stairs, the front door slammed, and we saw him sprinting down Baker Street as fast as his legs could carry him. That man is a cold-blooded villain, Holmes laughed, sitting back down. He'll start with small tricks like this and end up on the gallows one day. Watson asked, How did you be so sure? It was simple, Holmes explained. Only the stepfather benefited from the situation. The two men were never seen together. The disguise, the glasses, the voice, the whiskers was obvious. But the typewriter was the final proof. When I wrote to his office, his reply had the exact same flaws as Hosmer's love letters. And will you tell Miss Sutherland? Watson asked. If I tell her, she won't believe me, Holmes sighed. As the old saying goes, it's dangerous to take a cub from a tiger, but it's just as dangerous to take a delusion away from a woman. She'll find out the truth in her own time.